Nazanin, thank you so much for sitting down with Forbes.
Thanks for having me.
You are an actress and an activist. Which came first?
Okay, so I was born in 1979, sort of like in a direct aftermath of a revolution, of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. My mother was 19 and I joke that my first protest was in 1979, and people are like, well, how old are you now? And I'm like, no, I was in my mother's uterus. That was my first protest, when she protested against the newly forming Islamic Republic, because she saw what was going to happen. She sort of had a vision of what that would look like for the future of Iran, and she understood that she couldn't raise a daughter, or a child, much less a daughter, in a country where people's rights, and particularly women and girls' rights, were being stripped away, and their political, social freedoms were being restricted so quickly. And my father was a dissident. He opposed the Islamic Republic as well, and so his life was in danger. We had to escape. So that was my sort of my entry into the world. And when I became an actor, first of all, I was going to be a doctor, because I thought that's what all good Iranian kids are supposed to do with their lives, be academic, and it's very much sort of instilled and ingrained in us from an early age to succeed in academics, and particularly in medicine. And I thought that's how I'm going to help the world, right? So I thought, and I did. I graduated with honors in pre-med and applied to medical school, took the MCATs, and I realized after succeeding in that stage that my heart was in the arts, in the performing arts, and particularly acting. And I just didn't know how to break it to my father, but I said, hey, thanks for college, but I'm going to go act now. And he was just so shocked. And mainly he was concerned, because he's like, he wanted his, after everything my family and most immigrant families go through, to find a safe haven, to be able to raise me in a place where I could reach my full potential, unlike what they foresaw happening in our homeland, Iran. They wanted that safety and security for me. So essentially, I broke their hearts a little bit, but now they're happy. But as soon as I became an actor, I knew that I needed to fulfill that side of me that wanted to help people. And I didn't know what that would look like. Until I started partnering with Amnesty International very early on in my acting. So at one point, that balance of acting and activism skewed heavily on the activism side. So I was sort of more engaged in that and more known for that than being an actor. So I would say sort of like on par with each other.
It's always been intertwined. Yeah. Is there a mission statement that unites those two roles?
I feel like as an actor, I get to portray the human condition, and as an activist, I hopefully get to change the human condition.
And there are a lot of human conditions that need changing. And as we look at your home country, the protests that have erupted in the aftermath of the death of Mahsa Amini have been heart-wrenching to watch from stateside. First of all, how have you been? How is your family?
I mean, it has been traumatizing for every Iranian across the world to see what's happening in our homeland. But in the 15 years I've been doing this advocacy of human rights advocacy for Iran, this movement didn't happen overnight. This is, for people who are paying attention now, they need to know that this is a 44-year struggle since the inception of the Islamic Republic in 1979. Women first, when they were imposed, when the mandatory hijab was imposed on women in Iran, women took to the streets in the tens of thousands to oppose it. Acid was thrown in their faces, batons to their necks. They were beaten, they were arrested, tortured, rape. I mean, all of these things are things that have been happening throughout the past 44 years. But in the aftermath of Mahsa Amini's murder in custody, it's taken on a new sort of life. These protests, these people, women taking to the streets, and not only taking off their mandatory headscarves and waving them in protest, as they've been doing in starting in December 2017, but burning them and setting them ablaze and cutting their hair in protest, dancing in the streets. Their courage was contagious. 12-year-old girls going out into the streets saying, we don't want an Islamic Republic. It's really unprecedented, this level of courage. And I think that level of courage was contagious, and it has galvanized Iranian society at large to understand the intersectionality of gender equality and every other basic human right. So now they're on the streets demanding freedom, demanding democracy, understanding that these things that they have in common, it's not just about the mandatory hijab or women's rights, it's about the fact that they don't want torture. They want to be able to walk into the streets and trust the security forces and the police to protect them, not to abduct them, take them to an undisclosed location and interrogate them, beat them, torture them, kill them. There's no due process in Iran. There are no fair trials. The legal age of women, marriage for women, dropped from 18 to 9 after the 1979 revolution. It was later raised to 15, but girls as young as 9 can still get married with the permission of their father or a judge. They have half the value of a man in a court of law. There are many layers of discrimination and dehumanization that women experience in Iran. The compulsory hijab is just an outward symbol of all of those things. So the problems with human rights in Iran are that it's so layered that this has just been sort of the spark, and women really have been the spark and the engine of this current revolution.
They really have. On the 2022 Forbes Power Women list, we list the world's most powerful women, and we listed Mahsa Jina Amini at number 100 because of the way. It's the first posthumous listing we've ever done, but the way that women have been leading this revolution, the way that her death sparked this moment. I do want to ask, when we published the list of the world's most powerful women in December 2022, the UN had just removed Iran from the Council on Women. It felt like I don't want to use the word victory. It felt like we were on the precipice of real progress. 3 months later, I'm not sure if we've seen as much as we hoped then. How would you characterize where we stand right now?
I mean, there has been, that was an unprecedented move. To expel the Islamic Republic from the UN Commission on Status of Women was unprecedented. Everyone said it couldn't be done. And it served multi-purposes. It wasn't just a sort of a shaming of the Islamic Republic. It took away their legitimacy and the fact that they were normalizing themselves just by association, just by being on this body. But we need far more than that. We need this fact-finding mission at the UN, the Human Rights Council, to actually find the truth, report the truth, and have consequences, punitive measures for the Islamic Republic. As long as they feel that they can get away with what they're doing, they'll continue. And every protest will be cracked down on. And we need to make sure that we have policies in place that empower civil society in Iran and disempower the Islamic Republic. And we just haven't done that yet. We've taken huge strides forward globally, but we need to be decisive and unified in our response to the Islamic Republic in a similar way that we were with Putin in Ukraine. We haven't done that. And until the free world comes together and has a similar response to the Islamic Republic, which is an occupying force in Iran, much as Putin is in Ukraine, we're not going to succeed. So my intention and my hope is that lawmakers around the world understand that this is a global threat, that the Islamic Republic, if they're willing to do this to their own women and children, their own people, they pose such a threat to global peace. And if for no other reason, then do it for that reason, to bring about global peace and stability.
I was going to ask what your call for the global community was going to be, but that's a good one. Are we losing steam? I mean, Americans protested in solidarity in September. It feels like it has maybe fallen off the radar for some people. Do you feel that way?
I feel like, some people ask me, is this revolution dead? And my answer is, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, nobody said the civil rights movement in America was dead. So when protest movements have ebbs and flows, sometimes you see more people on the streets, sometimes you see less. But in this renewed moment of people being outraged with the chemical attacks on schoolgirls, where at least 1,000 schoolgirls have been harmed across 20 provinces in Iran, and people inside Iran are back on the streets again, we have to remember this is an ongoing fight. And our outrage, we have to turn our outrage into action. It's not enough to post on social media. I always talk about this idea of performative advocacy that we've talked about before. Raising awareness and conscientizing is so important. But what's next, right? So it's easy for us to say what we're against, what we don't want. But we also have to really focus on what we want. What is the goal? What is the desired outcome? And solution-based advocacy is so important. And I think that's what's really missing. We can raise awareness all we want, but unless we're actually focused on the policies that we want in place and how to achieve them, then we can't really find a way forward. So my hope is that people start investing in actually having the difficult conversations of how can we turn our outrage into action.
Solutions-based advocacy.
Exactly.
Are you optimistic right now?
I am. And the reason for that is because there was a great piece in Foreign Affairs last year by Mark Chenoweth and Harry Ratchou, 3 incredible women who wrote this piece about why, it's called, I think, Iran's Women on the Front Lines, and it's basically about why when women are centered in movements, the chance of success is higher. Because activists like me have more access to levers of power and of control in society that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. There's a powerful image of an elderly woman, a mother in Iran, wearing a headscarf, marching up to her son, who's in the security forces and about to engage in a brutal crackdown on protesters, grabbing him by the arm and marching him away from committing that crackdown. And that is, in essence, what we have is mothers, sisters, daughters being outraged. And how can that not pull on the heartstrings of men in society? And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing men take to the streets, put their lives on the line now to protect their sisters and mothers and wives and daughters. And that's the power of a female-led revolution. And we've seen higher success rates in the past in Argentina, in Chile, in Brazil, in the Philippines. So I have a lot of hope that this time is different. This female-centered revolution will actually succeed. Now, when that's going to happen depends on us tipping that balance, because the margin of between success and failure is so slim. It's up to us now to tip that balance in favor of the protesters.
Nazanin, thank you so much.
Thank you.